We on air. I want to welcome everybody tonight to Right Connection Church for our Wednesday night study group. Everybody's out having fun and enjoying the bright sunshiny day. We are on our last session, our session 4 of Me and My Big Mouth by Andy Stanley. This one here has been touching, and this one here is another one of them that's going to bring the word to you in a different manner and make you think about it in a different kind of light of what's been going on and what all we have here. We are blessed beyond measure that we can actually join and discuss these things, and it's really touching. Let's invite the Lord in here with us. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, mercy, and grace, and just ask your presence here, that your words will be spoken, that each and every one that's listening will be touched by your words and lifted up. And be encouraged, dear Lord, to reach out and search and have a deeper relationship with you. That's what this is about, Lord. May we touch many for your kingdom. Again, we thank you for your presence and just want your word spoken through us, to us, and may we receive it in your precious name. Amen. Yep. Tonight is a little bit different. We're going for session 4. As soon as Mikey, we ain't on the air.
Yeah, you are. I'm watching.
Okay.
Amy's on the way.
Okay, we got more coming in, but we're thankful for every chair that's filled and every heart that we can touch by the screen. So anybody that's watching, may these words lift you up and encourage, but main thing, we're going to find a deeper relationship with the Lord. Yep, we'll go for session 4. You okay? Okay. Yep, part 4. There we go.
Here's the deal, Dave. It's Greg. Yeah, I know. I know it's Greg, Dave. But here's the thing. Ever since I put you in charge of social media, it just really hasn't been working out. It's not my sweet spot. Right. I'm an accountant. First of all, you don't have to sign your name after everything. What are you, my dad? Well, again, And then I have 6 tweets after that just say Google.com. Now, I can't even figure out, what was going through your brain when... Were you trying to Google from within Twitter? Please don't answer that. Long story short, my little brother is about to graduate from high school. He's got 10,000 followers. I don't know how he does it. No one does. But we're going to put him in charge of this, okay? So go ahead and send me an electronic mail with the usernames and passwords. Think you can handle that, Dave? Or you need to write it down on your little pen and paper here. Gonna handle that. Okay, great. And then after that, we're going to talk about your future here at this company. Thank you. Want an email?
I'll give you an email. That's good. I like that. Dear Hipster Doofus, here are your painfully obvious passwords. You bearded, no good, sneaker wearing. Oh, that's good. I haven't heard language like that since the Navy. Just because Daddy owns the company. Ooh, that's dark. But I like it.
Hey, Greg,
Yeah, Mike.
you know you've been tweeting?
I've been twittering!
On his way out.
Now, Joseph was Jacob's favorite son because he was the son of Jacob's favorite wife. Okay, he had 2 wives and a couple of other ladies he had children from. So here's kind of a takeaway for today. Men, never have a favorite wife, okay? It will cause problems. And it caused so many problems for Jacob because he had a favorite wife named Rachel and had a son named Jacob, and Jacob was his favorite son. And then Rachel gave birth again to a boy they named Benjamin, but she died in childbirth. So he was constantly mourning the loss of his favorite wife, and but consequently Joseph became his favorite son. So Benjamin's too young to be a part of this narrative, but Joseph had these, for the most part, older brothers, we think, and all 10 of these older brothers despised him and resented him because they knew their father loved him more than he loved the rest of the boys. So as the story goes, and if you grew up in church or if you're Jewish, you know this story. One day, Jacob says to Joseph, I want you to go check on your brothers, which Joseph hated to do, and the brothers hated it even more. And so Joseph shows up, and they see him coming, and they said, you know what, we've had enough of this. This is ridiculous. They take Joseph, they strip him of his robe that his father, the special robe his father had made for him, and they throw him in a pit. That was an empty pit. It wasn't full of water, but it wasn't a pleasant place to be. And they decide, you know what, let's kill him, but before we kill him, let's have lunch. So the text says they sat down to eat their meal, and they looked up and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Meanwhile, Joseph's like, hey guys, okay, guys, we don't, Joseph, he's got to be scared to death. He's just, this is, terrorizing to him because, he knows how much they resent him. But they see this caravan coming. The text says, Judah said to his brothers when they saw this caravan going by, what will we gain? I mean, what good is it to us if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? And they're like, yeah, good point. Come, he said, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. And then this flood of compassion. After all, he is our brother. And all 10 went, he is our brother. And then the compassion left. And he's our own flesh and blood. So they pull him out of the pit. Of course, he's terrified, just terrified, doesn't know what's going to happen. And then he sees these strangers, and they're speaking foreign languages, plural. And they tie him by his hands, and they sell him. They sell their own brother to these slave traders. And again, if we pause long time to create this sense of terror that had to be going through his mind. Now, Joseph, at this point, is 17 years old. He's a teenager, and he is being sold to slavers. He doesn't know who he will end up with, and he doesn't know what he will be purchased for. And they wave goodbye, and off goes Joseph. They know they will never see him again, and he assumes he will never see home again. The text continues. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. And then perhaps the strangest part of the story. In fact, this is repeated throughout. It's the theme of the story. And in the midst of all of this chaos, the author tells us, and the Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. And we think, no. If the Lord was with Joseph, Joseph would be home with Jacob, and it would be the 10 brothers that would be sold into slavery, right? Because Joseph hasn't done anything wrong. The wicked brothers are getting by with something horrible. I mean, if God is with someone, don't good things happen? And throughout this story, this is the theme over and over and over. But the more amazing thing to me, and perhaps the message for you, and the takeaway for me, is that not only was God in some mysterious way with Joseph through this entire ordeal, Joseph chose to live as a man that God was with. That Joseph decided to live his life as if God was with him rather than God having abandoned him. Well, eventually, Potiphar notices Joseph is a very talented person, and years go by. Okay, the problem with the story is all compressed in a few chapters, but this is over the course of many years. So some years go by. Eventually, I guess he learned the language. I don't know if he could even speak the language of the people he was serving. He eventually learns the language. He's very skilled. Potiphar notices him, and he gives him more and more responsibility. And before long, after a few years, Joseph is managing Potiphar's household. And Potiphar wasn't the only person that noticed Joseph. Potiphar's wife noticed Joseph. And Potiphar's wife comes to him and says to him, and the text doesn't give us this language, but she could have used this language. She said to him, slave, because he's a slave. Slave, I require your presence. I require you to sleep with me. This isn't an ask. I'm commanding you. I own you, and slave, I want you, young man, to sleep with me. And for the first time, perhaps in her whole life, she got a no for an answer. Okay, traditionally in ancient cultures where there are slaves don't say no. Slaves don't say anything. Slaves just obey. And this slave, this Hebrew slave, has the audacity to say to his master's wife, no, I'm not going to do what you require me to do. And the reason he gave is amazing. The first reason was, look, your husband has put everything he owns in my charge under my authority except for you. So how can I do this? But then this next statement is amazing. He says, how then, he says to her, to Potiphar's wife, how then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? To which we think, God? You mean the God who has done nothing for you lately? The God who watched as you were sold by your brothers to who knows what, for who knows what for? You mean the God who stood by and did not intercede, who did not come to your rescue? This is the God, Joseph, that you continue to be faithful to? Well, this had to have been so offensive to Potiphar's wife, because basically he accused her of trying to sin, and who knows if she even knew what he was talking about. Well, this goes on day after day after day, and he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And finally, she's had enough. And finally, she's tired of the guilt. Finally, she's tired of this rebellious slave, and she accuses Joseph of trying to rape her. When Potiphar finds out he has no options, he takes Joseph and he puts him in, the text calls it a dungeon. The text says Joseph's master, Potiphar, put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And then again, the author brings us back to this theme. But while Joseph was in the prison, the Lord was with him, to which we say, no. See, if the Lord is with you, you're not in prison. She goes to prison, okay? The whole thing isn't, this is not working. Aren't good things supposed to happen to good people? And aren't bad things supposed to happen to bad people? And if you're faithful, isn't it all supposed to work out? The text says, and God, he showed him favor in the eyes. He granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. Again, who wants to have favor in the eyes of the prison warden? If you know the prison warden, things are not going well for you, okay? How is it that God is with you and you have a personal relationship with the prison warden because now you're working for the prison warden? And we're reminded of something that all of us need to be reminded of every once in a while, that bad things have been happening to good people for a long time. But the corollary is this: God has been with good people in bad times for a long time as well. Well, eventually, Joseph becomes somewhat of the administrative assistant to the warden. He's kind of running the whole prison. He's just got extraordinary administrative skills. And we find out later in the story, he does not want to be there. I mean, he has some good luck. He has some things work out for him, but he's miserable. And based on the description of this prison, this dungeon, it was probably underground. Who knows if he ever saw the light of day or how rare it was for him to ever be able to step outside into the sun. Well, as the story goes, Pharaoh's butler and Pharaoh's baker fall out of favor with Pharaoh, and Pharaoh has them thrown into the same prison. And of course, they meet Joseph, and time goes by. Again, years go by. And one day, the text tells us, and it's kind of funny, that one day they wake up and they see Joseph, and Joseph can tell they're down. And when I read this, I think, of course they're down. They're like down. They're like in the dungeon. Everybody's down all the time. But apparently on this particular morning, they were downer than normal down, okay? And Joseph says to them, hey, I can tell something's going on. You know, what's going on? And they both said, well, we both had dreams, and these dreams were so vivid and so real. We feel like they mean something, and we've talked about it, and we just don't know what these dreams mean. And Joseph says, well, give me a shot. I've in the past been able to interpret dreams. So they tell Joseph their dreams. And first the butler goes. He says, well, I had this dream. And Joseph listens to the dream and he says, well, I got some good news. In 3 days, it's Pharaoh's birthday. And on Pharaoh's birthday, he's going to lift up your head and restore you as his personal butler and wine taster. And then Joseph says this. It's so honest. He says, but when you're free, tell them about me. I was kidnapped from my hometown. I was kidnapped from my people. I've done nothing wrong. I do not deserve to be here. I want someone on the outside to know I'm here and to get me out of here. And of course, the butler's thinking, well, yeah, if this dream comes true and I'm restored, of course I'll remember you. Well, the baker's listening to all this. He's like, wow, that was good news. Hey, what about me? So he tells his dream to Joseph, and Joseph pauses and says, well, your head will be lifted up too. Off your body, unfortunately, and then your body is going to be impaled on a stake, and the birds are going to come and eat your flesh. Now, why Joseph felt like he had to go into all that detail for the poor baker, I don't know. I think he should have said, you know, I don't know what your dream means. We'll just have to, I don't know. Boy, we'll just, let's just give it a few days. We'll wait and see. Well, sure enough, 3 days later, one of them is beheaded and impaled, and the butler is restored. And put yourself, if you can, it's difficult for us to be in this situation. Imagine, and a day goes by, and Joseph is thinking, maybe this is the day. Surely the butler is going to say to someone on the outside, oh, you're not going to believe this. There's a guy in our dungeon who predicted this very event. And 2 days go by, and 3, and a week, and a month. And the text tells us that the butler forgot all about Joseph. And for some of us, that's our life story right now, isn't it? You just feel forgotten. And a year goes by, and another year goes by, and another year goes by. And for all Joseph knows, this is his lot in life for the rest of his life. But day after day after day, he continues to live as if God is with him. Now Joseph is 30 years old, and Pharaoh has a series of dreams. And he's so disturbed by these dreams, and they're so vivid. And he believes that somehow they mean something, so he calls in the court magicians, and he calls in his counselors, and he shares this dream, and nobody can come up with an interpretation for these dreams. And then the butler remembers, and he says to Pharaoh, these are my words, not the text, Pharaoh, you remember a few years ago, we had that little, it wasn't a big deal, it wasn't a really big deal, but you did have me, I hate to even bring it up, you had me thrown in the dungeon for a very short time because it wasn't a big deal. Anyway, while I was there, I met a Hebrew slave, and he listened to my dream and told me what would happen based on my dream, and sure enough, it happened. And I think perhaps if he's still there, who knows if he's still there? Who knows if he's still anywhere? Who knows if he's alive? It's been years. But if he's there, you should find him. So the text says that Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. And when he had shaved, because he was a mess, and when he had changed his clothes because he smelled like dungeon, he came before Pharaoh. Now, again, the contrast, we can't even begin to picture this. To come into the daylight for maybe the first time in a long time. Next thing you know, you're being shaved and pampered and perfumed, and suddenly, what's going on? Well, Pharaoh wants to see you. Pharaoh wants to see me. Pharaoh wants to see you. Here's how far you can get to Pharaoh. Here's how you walk. Here's how you kneel. Here's how you bow. Here's the etiquette. You need to pay attention. He wants you in his presence now. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Now, what happens next is perhaps the most courageous phrase, the most courageous statement uttered by anyone, anywhere, in all of history. This is Joseph's big chance. And Pharaoh says, I'm going to tell you my dream, and then I want you to tell me, to give me an interpretation. But before Pharaoh can even begin telling Joseph what he dreamed, this foreigner for whom his God had done nothing for him lately, says to the most powerful man on the planet, I cannot do it. And the butler thinks, hi-ho, hi-ho, it's back to the dungeon I go. Why in the world did I bring this up and draw attention to myself and my past? This is not going to go well for me. Now, Joseph should have stopped right there, but he doesn't. He says, I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God. Now, this is even worse. He should have just stopped with, I can't do it, may I go, please. But God will give Pharaoh, who thinks he is a God, who every day of his life is reminded you are a God, that you are the son of our ultimate God. He said, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Oh, Pharaoh, you are little g God, but big G God can answer your request. Well, Pharaoh had to have been offended. Everybody in the courtroom's offended. Get a steak ready. But Pharaoh's like, you know what? I want somebody to tell me what this dream meant. So he explains it to Joseph. And Joseph explains.
Talk about technical difficulties
Grew up
tonight.
in church. And you had a sequence of dreams is because God is the fact that this is going to happen. Dreams mean the same things. Egypt is going to experience 7 extraordinary years. There is going to be so much grain. Your people are going to be swimming in. People from all over the world are going to come here and purchase your grain. It's going to kill the economy probably because the prices are going to go so low. There's going to be so much grain. But after those 7 years, there's going to be a famine, and the famine is going to be so bad that everyone will have forgotten about all the abundance. It's going to be so bad. And so that's the interpretation of your dream. 7 years of prosperity, 7 years of famine. At which point, Joseph should have stopped talking. But then Joseph does the unthinkable. Joseph begins to give Pharaoh advice. At which point, everyone in the courtroom must moan. This kid still smells like dungeon. And he leans in and he says, here's what you ought to do. No one speaks this way to Pharaoh. Here, do, and he kept going. He says, here's what you need to do. During the years of plenty, you need to designate certain cities in the country, grain cities. You need to build extraordinarily large silos. Tax the
This is weird. This is weird. We just watched this and it was perfect. Okay. What has it done? This is so strange.
This is good. Pay attention. You're gonna all these and sell it to the people. I was like, nah, I see where this is going. Keep going. Sell it to the people, and this is going to be such a big, complicated thing. You're going to need somebody to put in charge of this, because somebody can buy off this ball for the next 7 years. Somebody needs to wake every single day for the next 7 years working on this and then managing it on the back end. Silent. Good. All is efficient. By the end, Pharaoh entire personally. Because by the end of the famine, it was so severe, people began trading their cattle, their land, their slaves for grain. And guess who owned it all in the end? Pharaoh, let my people go, but that's a different story. Okay, so Pharaoh asked him, can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? Now, when Pharaoh asks a question and he kind of telegraphs what he wants the answer to be, everybody in the courtroom gives him the answer he wants because he's a God. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all of this known to you, not only what's going to happen, but what we should do about it, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace. And of course, the people who think they're second, third, and fourth in line are like, wait. Okay, we've known this kid 45 minutes, and you're about to put him in charge of the whole, but you don't, it's Pharaoh. You don't do that. He's going to be in charge of my palace. All my people, they're to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. And he makes Joseph the prime minister of Egypt. Joseph gets to work. We know he's efficient. He trained in the dungeon. And now he gets the story, chooses the organize.
That is so weird.
And I mean, the rain ceases and things get so bad. Everybody forgot, as he predicted. They forgot about the good years. And at the right time, when the time was right, they began to sell the grain, and people spent all their money on grain, and they traded their cattle. And this famine reached outside the borders of Egypt all the way north to where Joseph's family lived. And they begin to feel the effects. And the text says that when Jacob, Joseph's father, learned that there was grain in Egypt, this is funny, he said to his sons, the other 10 sons plus Benjamin, why do you just keep looking at each other? I mean, we're starving to death. He continued, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die. In other words, why did I even have to guys, come on. We're going to die. You've got to go down there and buy some of this grain. So the boys load up and they head to Egypt. And the stage is set. And the fortunes have been reversed. Whew. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold the grain to all his people. Well, look at there. And apparently the boys showed up in the very city where Joseph just happened to be on that particular day, dispensing and overseeing the dispensing of grain. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. And as soon as Joseph saw them, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger. And they did not recognize him. And do you know why they did not recognize him? Because he walked like an Egyptian. That's why. They didn't recognize Joseph because he's 30 years old, and the last time they saw him, he was a scrawny little teenager probably who was terrified. Who was terrified. And the last they heard of him was him begging for mercy, and they just erased all that from their minds. And now they are in the presence of the second most powerful person on the planet as far as they were concerned. So here's the question we all have to wrestle with. And some of you are not wrestling with this now, but you will in the future. I just want you to be ready. What do you do when you've got the power and your words determine the destiny of your enemy? What happens when things turn around, when what goes around came around? What happens when you've got the power and your words determine the destiny of your enemy? And the answer to this question depends upon what you did with your bitterness and your anger. And if you are still dragging it around when this happens, you will be like the people you don't like. And as his boys were bowed down before him, I'm sure the things that he just remembered, those nights with the Ishmaelites, hearing them laughing by the campfire, wondering, where am I going? What's happening to me? Who knows what happened to him or how he was treated along the way? The prayers that weren't answered, standing on that auction block with people walking around checking him out, deciding who should purchase him, what he was worth, and what he would be good for, what he could be used. Just when things at least were,
That's amazing.
to the are responsible. For 3 chapters.
Unbelievable.
He's no.
It's about to the end.
One of you's hostage. Oh no, yeah, if you grain, they go. And for several months, they're back and forth. He accuses them of being spies. Then he sets them up and, basically makes it look like Benjamin stole something of value. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And basically he's testing them to see, have they changed? Are they still the men that I remember when I was 17? And I don't know, but I'm guessing he had to have been wrestling with his own emotions as well. What do I do? What do you do when you've got the power and your words determine the destiny of your enemy? And the text says, as this whole story escalates and there's so much detail, months again go by. And finally, they're all back in Egypt. And he gets them in a room and he has his attendants and his guards. And then he does something that completely freaked them out. The text says that Joseph could no longer control himself before all of his attendants. And he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." And suddenly they are alone in the room with this guy who has given them so much attention, and they just can't figure out, why has he singled us out? Why all of this interaction with this? Why are we anyone to this person? So there was no one in the room. There was no one in the room when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Imagine this moment. And Joseph said to his brothers, he'd been waiting for this, "I am Joseph." And they wetteth themselves. Okay, that's not in the text, but their bowels released. Because they expected him to do unto them what they had done unto him. With one word, 10 stakes in the courtyard to be impaled. The way it worked back then, you didn't impale everyone at one time. Oh no, that was too quick. You had the 9 sit in a group with their hands tied as they watched the one slowly impaled on a sharp pointed stake. And then you watched as he slowly died. And not to be too graphic, you died when the stake finally reached your heart because of the weight of your body. And then the second brother. This would take hours and hours. It could take more than a day. That's what awaited them. Joseph said, "Is my father still living?" That's it. Is my father still? He had no idea what was happening back at home. But his brothers, of course, this makes perfect sense, but his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified in his presence. because they were rehearsing as well what was said and what was done and what would probably happen to them. But they did not need to be terrified in his presence, because Joseph had lived as if God was with him during his absence. And he kept bitterness at bay. What Joseph could not have known was that God's plan for the ages dangled by the thread of his one word. That before him sat the 10 tribes of the 12 tribes of Israel, through whom God would introduce the Savior of the world, who would do for the world exactly what Joseph ultimately did for his brothers. The Savior of the world who would do for you exactly what Joseph would ultimately do for his brothers. Forgive them. Because he didn't carry around a bag of bitterness and a sack of anger, even though he had every reason in the world to do so. He has them stand up, embraces all of them, and says, you're to go home, you're to get dad, you're to get your families, your grandfamily, your kids. I want to know all your kids' names, bring pictures. I want to know what's been going on. I've been missing out. I want you to go home. I'm going to send as much grain as you'll ever need. I'm going to send an armed escort. I want you to bring them all back, and I'm going to care for you for the rest of your lives. And he does. And years go by. And then Jacob, their father, dies. And the 10 get together and go, uh-oh. That's what he was waiting for. He got us here. We have been his hostages all along. He was just waiting for daddy to die. And once daddy dies, now he's going to exact his vengeance on us. And his brothers, the text says, they came to him and they threw themselves down before him and they said, we are your slaves. We sold you into slavery. If you'll spare our lives, if you will spare our children's lives, if you will spare our grandchildren's lives and the lives of our people, we are your slaves. But Joseph said to them, do not, this is so powerful, do not be afraid. And then here's the question that you're going to have to ask yourself at some point in your life. Am I, Joseph says, in the place of God? Not am I God, I know I'm not God, but am I in the place of God? So listen to this. You will never experience, I've seen this played out, some of you it's playing out right now. You will never experience the good that comes from the bad unless you recognize God was with you during the bad and then refuse to play God when things are good.
That is one of the most powerful chapters, I think. There's so many, but just the whole story there, that is one of the most powerful chapters of greed, love, grace, and forgiveness. It's just so touching. And we're going to discuss that a little bit tonight. I'm pretty sure all of y'all have read that chapter. I hope you have. The video recap, Joseph's story. Joseph was the favorite son of Jacob. That's in Genesis 37:3. Joseph's brother sold him into slave to a band of Ishmaelites. That's good family ties, ain't it? You know, we had picked on one of our siblings, but these folks were serious. Sold him as a slave. I love that where they discussed about killing him. Said, well, let's eat lunch first. You know, there wasn't a Krispy Kreme, so I know Brenda wasn't part of that. But, you know, we're just going to kill him. Well, yeah, okay, well, let's have lunch first. Well, he is our brother, our flesh and blood. Why not wait? And then sold him. Joseph was placed in charge of Potiphar's household and had success. That's in Genesis 39:1-6. Potiphar's wife falsely accuses Joseph and he was thrown into prison. Wow. Let's see. Good home, good family, sold into slavery because his siblings didn't like him, pulled out, raised up, thrown back in prison on a lie. Bad things been happening to good people for a long time. While he was in prison, Joseph interpreted the dreams of the cupbearer and baker. And that was kind of strange there. Had to tell the second one, yeah, you're going to be lifted up, but not like you really want to. Then Joseph was called from prison to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. All of these start out in Genesis 37 and goes through 42, 42, 45, 50. It's a good book. Joseph was placed in charge of Pharaoh's palace and grain storage. Let's see, went from a high to a low to a high to a low to a high. Ooh. Joseph's brothers traveled to Egypt for grain during the famine. Can you imagine seeing that? While Joseph's brothers was in Egypt for grain during the famine, Joseph recognized them but kept his identity secret. Kept it hidden. Who could do that? I mean, think of the power right there. First impression is, burn me, I'll set you on fire. I'll get you back. That's the human side. We're going to get you back. What do you do when you got the power in your words determine the destiny of your enemy? All he had to do is speak it. After some time, Joseph revealed himself to his brothers. Joseph offered them food and shelter in Egypt. And Joseph's brothers was nervous after the death of their daddy, after the death of the father. Can you imagine the fear that they would have had of one person that they took for nothing? Couldn't stand him, even though it was bloodline. Sold him to slavery. But I guess that was better than killing him. I guess dinner, that somebody had to prepare a good lunch. I wonder if KFC was back then. You think about it. Here we are. We already threw him in a pit. We're thinking about killing him. Well, let's just eat lunch first. You reckon the lunch was that good? Something got their attention up. When you think about your ancestry, who in your family tree made a decision, for better or for worse, that's affected you? Who's in your family tree that's made a decision? The best we can determine after we had our family reunion this weekend was our grandfather. We finding more and more out that when he came over from Finland, he spoke 3 different languages. Tim Smith, a very smart person. But his decision to come over is why we're here. We're just second generation. Because when he got married the first time, he had a daughter, and the wife died. He got married the second time and had a daughter and our dad. So that's the first generation in America. And we're the second. All off of his decision to come over. Anybody got one? Who's in your ancestor? Who's made a decision either good or bad? We ain't the only one. Somebody's bound to have something there. No? Nobody? It gets fun. But even closer to that, somebody could have said something as simple as, I'm going to buy the lottery ticket and won it. That'd been a great little legacy to leave, all that money. It ain't happened to us, I found the safest way to fight identity theft: stay broke. Nobody steals your identity. They don't take the identity of a broke person. Yes, ma'am.
My grandmother, which I call my mom, the doctor, she said
Yeah. Being an adoption and keeping in the family. So there are decisions that you make will affect other generations and you don't even realize it. And here's a good one for you. What's the difference between justice and revenge? What makes revenge so appealing? It's personal. I get you back. You know, the state might get you for justice, but I'm gonna have it personal. I get the pleasure of seeing you squirm. I get the pleasure of punishing you. Is that really true? Do you really take pleasure in hurting somebody? Huh? No, I don't. No, I don't. We'll show you why. Have you or someone you know ever had a season of life when it felt like God had gone silent? With the perspective of time, can you see how God was working all alone? Yep. Anybody ever felt like God wasn't with you? You having some bad times, you having sickness, you having family issues, financial issues, school issues, and you just down on your luck and just feel,
Well,
sir?
I'll say this much because of that woman right there, Joe. I feel like $1 million because she says, "Hey, Alan, come on to church with us one day. Come on, you'll like it. Come on.
Yep.
Don't worry about the problem."
Yeah.
I feel better now.
Yeah. Because you felt like God wasn't with you.
She's a very good inspiration.
Yep. But you felt like God wasn't with you. You was trying to fight all this battle all your own. And you feel down, cast out, just helpless. The problems are so great.
I feel better because she told me, "Hey, come on, don't worry about them problems. Just come on, get in the truck. Come on, go
Yeah.
to church."
Find it. But when you look around, you see that God was working all along. Out of everything that I went through, I've never seen where he left me. I seen where I left him. And that's really tough when you can understand that. When you trying to do, as we said the other night, you're so focused on the provisions, you forget about the provider. And I have done that. We are so busy trying to get things to do, and you want things your way, and then all the little things start happening, one problem after another. Something simple at work just snowballs. I've seen it in restaurants before. You let one thing actually trip somebody up, and it just gets progressively worse throughout the entire day. And everybody is just in jitters and messed up because they're missing something. Something threw them off. And as we go through life, we trip up and we fall down. And then we realize he's been with us all along. What are some practical things you can do to live like God is with you during the seasons when it feels like he's not? What do y'all do when you feel like God's left you? When the burden is so great, you're trying to carry the load. What do? You go to church. And the church is just being around like-minded people who got to focus to do better. They're not going to focus on your mistakes and what got you there. They want to focus on the end results of where you're going. It don't matter about what happened to get you here. I don't care. I'm thankful you're here. Anybody got something? Come on, we can talk about this a little bit. What are some practical things you can do to live like God is with you during the seasons when it feels like he's not? Everybody's experienced a time of doubt. Everybody experienced trouble.
I think everybody has, and personally I have been, my life's not been perfect, but I think deep in your mind, God is there. You're just not seeking help from him, but he's there.
You know he's there, but you're not making the connection with him. The old wrestling thing, tag in wahoo, Yep. Some of y'all know the old wrestlers. Wow. Some of the old folks will get that, the younger ones won't. But that was the big thing. He's sitting there getting beat down. Old Paul Jones, he'd be getting a spanking, getting beat down, and everybody hollering, "Tag in Wahoo!" And he'd make it just right over there with his last dying breath and touch in, and Wahoo come in and say, "Save the day." You know, tag in Wahoo. When you're fighting the battles in life, you're trying to do it on your own, and you don't focus that he's there with you. He hasn't left you. You think Joseph was ever in that situation to where he felt like, I'm fighting this by myself? You think he had a reason to be doubtful? But he was grateful. He was still alive. His brothers didn't kill him. The slave traders didn't kill him. But everything that he did turned out to come back to bite him, to bring him up to another level. He never lost faith. God was always with him. But the practical things that you can do.
Well, I think I know for me, if I'm going through stuff, if I surround myself with reminders, like I keep my radio on the contemporary Christian stations 99.5% of the time. Every now and then I'll veer off to something else, but for the most part. One, because it's nothing but positive and encouraging information that's
Mhm.
coming at you. And it's a message. Every song is a message. I'm touched more by the songs that are pure scripture being sung to you,
Right.
And I have found, especially in the last 5 or 10 years or so, that those songs will reverberate with me through things that I go through the day, or times when I start to feel this way or that way. Scripture will come to me through a song. It'll be an earworm in my head or whatever. And so staying in a positive environment, so whether it's the music that you listen to or reaching out to someone who's a prayer partner or a prayer buddy or an accountability partner, someone else in faith, who's strong in faith that can just give you a word or a prayer and pray with you if you need it. But being surrounded by a positive influence rather than wallowing in the negative. Because there's sometimes when you want to do that too.
Oh,
You
yeah.
just want to play sad songs on the radio. I want to get it all out. And every now and then I think God just wants you to get it all out. Get over it.
Get it out of the way.
But yeah, because like Mike said, you know he's there in the back of your mind. You know he's there, whether you feel like you should call on him for help in that situation. Maybe it's something you got yourself into. That's me. I usually go, God, I'm not going to ask you for help with this because I know I put myself here, and I know you've given me what I need to get out of it. So, just staying in that, something that will pull you up, whether you really want to be pulled up in that moment or not, for me works.
The practical things that you do is recognize that was the problem. What pulled you down? Recognize it. Because if you ignore it, I don't think it'll go away. It'll always be nagging at you. You can't ignore it, but by moving up, taking it to God, and then getting around to others that will encourage you. Those are some practical things that you can do to know that God is still with you, that all through it, he never left you. But we'll get focused on the bad stuff and get the blinders on, and we won't look beside us to see what's really happening. And if somebody intended it for evil, what did he intend it for? Good. Do you see where his brothers intended it for evil? Ooh. At least they didn't kill him. I'd like to know what they had for lunch. That really amazes me, you know. Here we are, we done stripped him and threw him in a pit, and we're getting ready to kill him, but lunch is being served, and we ought to eat first. I'd like to know what they had for lunch. Well, you know, it had to be something great to get your mind off of killing your brother. Yeah, got that metal lunchbox or something with them, or you know, I don't know. You know, but yeah, have you ever thought about that? What could have taken their mind off of it so quick? Yeah, we'll kill him, but let's eat lunch first. Somebody was hungry and had something good. But there's God at work. Then sold into slavery. They intended that for evil because slaves didn't have a good life. And then bought, and just look at his life. And if he had all the authority, and he had every reason to be bitter. He had every reason to believe that God wasn't with him. Because, you know, somebody lie on me and I go to prison, whoo, that ain't a good sign. And I would have to question. My human side is going to have to question why. And what can I do when I get out to get them back? We've known of too many cases in the judicial system where somebody has lied on somebody and it cost them their life. But yet it was on a lie. And the liar walks. So sad. But your best thing to do is get around folks that will not tear you down. Do things that'll lift you up. Give praises and credit back to God. And grow. We all going to have troubles. We all going to have problems. We all going to have failures. Do we learn from them? We learn what not to do and how to help others with it. Turn to God and let him guide you. And here's a hard one. And I'm going to get some feedback from you because I really want it. Especially some that's been in any kind of businesses or supervisory. Have you ever ended up with the power over someone who previously mistreated you? How did you respond? Do you wish you had responded differently? There was the story I read about the nun that was taken advantage of back in World War II with the Nazis, and what they did to her was unspeakable, but she survived it. And after the war, she was going to teach others a new way of education systems and how to deal with things. And she goes to the seminar, and lo and behold, there's the soldiers that did everything to her. And she's got to go stand before them and try to teach them to lift them up. That's a good little story, and you ought to read what happened with her. How she broke down and said she couldn't do it, but through Christ, who strengthened her, she had to forgive those soldiers. She had every right just to walk out there and blow their brains out. War criminals. She had every right. But what she did was forgive them. And she grew. So, have you ever ended up with the power over someone who previously mistreated you? How did you respond? And do you wish you had responded differently? Some folks in supervisory's position, that you get an employee that they ain't the best in the world, and throughout time, you actually move up the work chain, and now you can get them back. What do you do? How do you handle it? That's where you come in, the difference between justice and revenge. Justice is punishment for the crime. Revenge is personal. Do you want anybody to take revenge against you? would you, the greatest person that's got, think about Jesus. If he wanted justice or revenge, look what they did to him. If they would do that to him, what do you think they'll do to us? So he had the power. But he sought justice, not revenge. Revenge is when you handle it yourself. Revenge is when you try to get back at somebody. Do unto them before they do unto me again. Revenge will eat you up. That's an anger. If you study into revenge and to get somebody back, better show mercy. Better show grace. Joseph was the prime example right there too. If anybody had it for revenge, could you imagine what he could have done to his entire family that done that to him? Just one word, and he could have wiped out the entire living generation. But what would that have done for God's plan? He would have got his revenge. Pharaoh would have let him do it. All he had to do is speak the word. He had that much authority. All he had to do is speak the word. And every living thing in that generation could have been wiped out. But he didn't. He forgave them. He reached out to them. And out of that 10 families, what did God use? Was that not 10 of the 12 tribes of Judah? So he could have got his revenge. I don't think it would have made God happy, though, do you? When you have the power to determine the destiny of someone who has wronged you, your words will be stones you throw or stones you use to pave forward. You ever thought about that? Your words are like stones. They say sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. There's some words that are spoken that really hurts people. But are you going to use them to pave the way forward? Talk about the legacy you want to leave if you ever find yourself with that kind of power. I hope my words never insult and hurt anybody. I joke around. I get rude, crude, and insensitive sometimes. And if I say something, and I joked about this before, if I say something that hurts your feelings, I want to thank you because you're paying attention. That's one of the things. But if I say something that's wrong and out of place, it's done out of ignorance. So help me learn too. And I think we can all be that way. We all snap to judgments. We all speak. What was that old saying? Mouth engaged before brain was put in gear. and you throw it out. My legacy I'd like to leave is one that he cared. Y'all got anything? You ever thought of it that way? The words that you use will be stones. You can either break windows and tear something down, or you can pave a road to the future. Something that simple. What can you do now that will help you respond with words that pave the way forward? Learn, connect, join the church, grow the church, be the church. Because we all have different parts that we bring to it. And it is a combined effort between all of us, even those that are listening at home, to touch each other, to lift each other up, to encourage each other when we have troubles and trials. It's nice to know that I can call on y'all. And it's nice to know y'all can call on us. Y'all can call on me. You can call on Linda. We can call on each other. hopefully we can be there. We're human too. We all have schedules that messes up, and we can't be everywhere at one time, but somebody can. And I'm trying to get better at that. But the words you speak, that two-edged sword, the sword is used for defense or offense. I don't want to offend you. I do want to get you to where you hear, you listen and understand and want to seek it better. This week, think about it. Bad things have been happening to good people for a long time, and God has been with those good people in those bad times. You'll never experience the good that comes from the bad unless you recognize that God was with you during the bad and then refuse to play God when things are good. That's where your revenge comes in. Refuse to play God when things are good. And in this week's prayer, God, in the times of trouble, help me trust that you are with me. I want that kind of trust to grow into a strong foundation for our relationship. And I pray that it will make me kinder and more loving to other people, even those who wrong me. Boy, simple little words right there, if we can just be strengthened. Because bad things have been happening to good people for a long time, and God has been with good people during the bad things for a lot longer. Anybody got anything? This was ending me and my big mouth. I think that was a good session. It was one that hopefully makes you think, makes you look at things a little bit different. Hopefully it's lifted you up. Hopefully your mouth will be tamed, and the words that come out of it will be peaceful, peacemaking, and connecting to God. That it'll make others want to seek the Lord and come into the kingdom. We have plenty of room in this building for many others. And all we have to do is just like that lady did to that gentleman there. You'll like it, come on down. That's all we got to do. It was simple little words that was spoken, and it'll change your life. It'll change their life. Yes, sir?
You ain't worried about you thinking you're a bad person because you're always inspiring to me. I'll sit and listen. I enjoy hearing what you got to say.
There is no bad people. It's those who have a lack of God around them, and we can encourage them to do better.
I like the sense of humor.
Well, I try to keep it. If I can get you laughing, I'll get you thinking. So if we can do that. Anybody got anything? We'll close this out. Gracious Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much that we have been able to come together and learn about me and my big mouth and the words that you have placed with many scriptures and many signs that we can see how to work and help others. Lord, I just ask you that you be with each and every one of us, that you'll curve our mouth, that you will make it stronger, that you will be with us, that we'll be able to touch many, open their eyes and heart, and make them want to seek your kingdom and have a connection with you. When things are bad and we're down, we know you're there with us, that we'll focus on you first and be lifted up and glorify you in our problems that we will have. But we thank you for your love, your mercy, your grace, and your presence with us. And we just ask your peace and protection and healing upon each and every one. All those that could not be here due to sickness, we just ask your blessings upon them and their homes. Those that are traveling, be with them, dear Lord. But guide us as we go through the week. May we speak your words to the ears that need to hear it. Bring someone into our path that we may glorify you and bring them into your path. And Lord, we just ask your blessings, and we give you praise, glory, and honor in the precious name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.